it as he will, but the big book, Neuroscience and Spirituality, The Path to Recovery. Mark Schottinger.
Well, I'll be happy to not get hit with tomatoes. I don't know about the valuation, but yeah, it was a very emotional night and day. What's very nice about services is you really get to understand who this person was. And his brother and sister made the greatest presentations about what a great kid, what a great leader, what a great person that most of us are before we get, kidnapped and held hostage by this disease and alcohol and drugs. And he did have a very good, clean year, and the family did a lot of healing, and so a lot of good will continue to come out of these lives that the founders who started this. So we're really started, but we're going to do a lot more. Gee, I brought my big book, except it's a little book, and I've taught a lot of lessons out of this for probably over 30 years. Nowadays, I definitely need my glasses to see it. And anytime the subject of recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous and the big book comes up, I really love talking about it. It's you may or may not know, the original name for the big book was The Way Out. Okay, and because that was already taken, they couldn't use it. But it was, that'd be a clearer message about what this book is about. It's about a way out of, alcoholism and addiction. From this book also came the Al-Anon programs and many other 12-step programs that have been around. And a lot of people also don't know that the greatest, it was crowned the greatest social movement of the 20th century was Alcoholics Anonymous in the world. So this is now a worldwide phenomenon. When a lot of the communist curtain fell, we have, when people had that freedom, they had the freedom to actually have AA meetings all over the world. And I will never forget, as long as I live, I was at the Seattle International Convention when about 25 countries who were never allowed to have even an AA or an Al-Anon meeting in their country before marched in with their flags. And it was the first time that they were ever at the International AA Convention. So sometimes I think we take for granted that we have so many meetings and so many things we can go to. And up until not too long ago, a lot of these countries couldn't even do this, couldn't gather like this and do that. So it's a great book and it's a great journey. And, the topic of the talk about neuroscience, and I'm not going to give you a bunch of charts in neuroscience, but I'll keep it simple, which is the easiest way for me to understand it also. And what's being proven in the last 10 years, especially, in neuroscience, kind of backs up what the big book has said, since its first printing. So it took science a long time to come around and verify what we know in these rooms that happens in recovery. Okay, and I'm glad it has, because it's I think that's important. I think it's important that people really see the show me side, the scientific side of why this stuff works. And basically, as in many things in science, until they develop the measuring tools to measure some of the things they need to measure, they can't really study it. And it makes some sense, They don't have a ruler for the neurons in the brain, but then when they started getting PET scans and you could see the infrared brain heat up, and that's really what happened with these PET scans. You could see that when people prayed, when people were in a group together, such as we're going to be in tonight, and when people heard certain things or whatever, their brains would light up in certain places. You could just see it from the energy fields. One of the other great breakthroughs they made, and we knew that people heal because alcoholics drink themselves silly. And, you know, that's that old joke about you have an alcoholic brain here and you have the brain of a neuroscientist here. Which one you want to go forward with? And the answer is the alcoholic brain, because it hasn't been used much. But that was supposed to be a little funnier, I guess. But so the other thing they found with PET scans is if, and we're going to talk about spirituality, meditation, that type of thing, right? So one of the things they found is if you took 100 people and had them meditate for a year, and you took another 100 people as a control group and they didn't meditate for a year, the people who meditated for a year actually grew prefrontal cortex, which is the executive part of the brain that we all have that gives us judgment and decision making and all that. So not only can the brain regenerate itself, but through spirituality and through meditation, which is one of the daily practices of recovery, you actually facilitate that process. So most of us don't ever use a lot of the brain capacity we have, and that's certainly you know, part of recovery. The other thing, and this is just a quick aside for all you marijuana lovers, the male brain isn't fully grown till we're 25 years old. The female brain is pretty much fully grown at 21 years old. And of course, as you know, us men never really catch up to you, although we think we do. So, because marijuana, for instance, is a fat-soluble substance and it builds up in the body, the worst thing young people can be doing is smoking a lot of marijuana because it directly interferes with all the forming processes of a lot of important things. So that we know very clearly also. So just in case you didn't think this was a big money-making scheme that's out there, like big tobacco, big marijuana, that's what's going on. It's going to hurt a lot of youth, and it already has hurt a lot of youth. That's not the topic of the talk tonight, but since we're talking about science and the brain and everything, and you rarely hear that. You rarely hear that. But, you know, the car accidents, the ODs, the emergency room visits, all that stuff is going way, way up in Colorado. And by the way, none of the illegal dealers quit doing their thing either. So there's just more and more and more of it. So one of the things that started Alcoholics Anonymous was a very famous psychiatrist in Europe called Dr. Carl Jung. And Dr. Carl Jung said, I have never seen men with this type of, men or women with this type of alcoholism recover unless they had some type of spiritual experience. And then we have seen that. And he said, as a doctor and as a scientist, we're pretty much, we can't do anything for you. You know, we don't have a cure. In fact, we barely understand it, but we have seen some people get better with a spiritual experience. And he's a very famous psychiatrist, and he was one of the early friends of AA. The fact is today, in April 2017, we're in the same boat when AA started, you know, 80, 90 years ago now. And that's the fact that we don't have any cure for alcoholism. We don't have any cure for addiction. Now, there's some pharmaceutical companies and some doctors and some people claiming we do, but we actually don't. And in fact, most of the, quote, new stuff that's around has been around for about 40 years now. They just repackage it, tell us it's not addicting, and then, you know, go on from there. So, you know, we can get to the moon. We're now trying to get to Mars. We can do a lot of things. We've had all kinds of medical breakthroughs and a lot of things in healthcare. But this remains the same. And what remains? What remains is that if people can cultivate and facilitate a spiritual experience and a spiritual condition, they can arrest this illness and recover from the deadly symptoms, and that has to be maintained. We never get a cure. We get a daily reprieve based on our spiritual condition. That's what this book says, okay? And that hasn't changed since before we wrote the book. For centuries, most of us who were alcoholic went into insane asylums. And then they returned it, a nice term, it was called inebriate asylums. So today we call them rehabs. They used to be called inebriate asylums. I kind of like the name inebriate asylums. It has a certain ring to it. But, so that's where we went forever. And of course, most of us were treated with depression, with shock treatments, all kinds of things. So people treated the symptoms, and it was kind of like, if you can just figure out why you're still mad that you got that red wagon for Christmas when you were 5 instead of the blue one you wanted, when we solve that problem, you're going to be able to drink okay again. And that had nothing to do with it. They're two separate problems. You know, alcoholism is a symptom of a deep underlying drinking problem. And that's a joke too, but it's true. So we spent many, many years looking for why people drink and, you know, this kind of thing. And drugs are a little different. Not everybody can become an alcoholic, but I could get everybody in this room to be a heroin addict or a cocaine addict, and just give me about 2 weeks with you, and we'll get you hooked right up, and we'll get your brain hooked right up. That you can't do that with alcohol because people can't ingest it, and that has more of a genetic basis to it. So, Bill, and you know, those of us in Al-Anon, we owe a great deal to Lois Wilson, because Bill kept going out and trying to help people get sober through the Oxford groups and to try to help provide a spiritual experience. And what happened is that nobody was getting sober. And he kept getting frustrated and coming home. And, you know, thank God for Lois Wilson, his wife, because he was going to quit doing the whole thing. And she said, "Don't you dare, Bill, because I don't know what you're doing for those other people, but this is the longest you've ever stayed sober trying to give this away." Okay? So then we have kind of the magic formula of both AA and Al-Anon: give it away to keep it. Have you ever heard that? Okay, so that's the catalyst that allows this thing to work. And by the way, one definition of spirituality is connection. Okay? We connected, you know, with the Reverend in here today. We connected with the music. We connected with each other. So part of spirituality is connection. So we have fellowship in both AA and Al-Anon and the other 12-step groups, and that's part of that spiritual experience. And just like you feel better when you go through the groups and other people share and that type of thing, that's a live electrical connection that connects in our brain and in our emotions. Okay? So Bill didn't quit, and he finally, he was going to go for a drink in Akron, and he picked up the phone and said, "Is there any alcoholics around here that might need some help, because I would like to try to help them?" And he was given the name of Henrietta Seiberling, who was actually part of the Firestone Empire, the Firestone Tire Empire. Big mansion, big place out in Akron. And they said, yeah, we got this doctor. We've been trying to sober up for a long time, and we just can't make hide nor hair of it. And so he went over to the gatehouse, and he was driven there by his son Bob Smith, who I had the pleasure to spend about 3 days with. And I also had the pleasure to spend the whole afternoon with Lois Wilson. These are the legends of this 12-step thing. And I just got lucky. It's nothing about me. It's just, you know, just got really lucky, and those were very blessed times. But so his son Smitty brings him to the gatehouse, and they talk. And it's the first time that Bob ever heard somebody talk about their own alcoholism. Didn't judge him, didn't do anything, just said, you know, here's what I do and whatever. And they hit it off. And that was on Mother's Day. Founders Day for Alcoholics Anonymous is in June. Do you know why? because Bob was warned not to go to a medical convention because it might be too much pressure, and Bob ended up getting drunk. So they made the Founders Day of Alcoholics Anonymous is in June because that's when Bob sobered up again. So Bill met Bob, and that was the start of AA. And you can go to their house where they ran a little rehab out of the house, even though they had drunks climbing down the drain pipes, and Smitty lost his room to Bill, and so on and so forth. So that's where this whole thing started. And of course, they already had part of the spiritual thing in the Oxford groups. Okay? So, they came up with a book, and it was supposed to be called The Way Out, and it ended up being the big book. Now, it's actually a big blue book. I was looking for my big blue book, but this is my old little book that I can just shove in my pocket. But I want to go and start with the 5th chapter, which is called How It Works. It's chapter 5 in the big book. And what is the purpose of this book? Okay? Lack of power, that is our dilemma. Okay? Lack of power. We lack the power and the ability to overcome addiction. Does that make sense? Haven't you seen that? For some reasons, we just don't seem to be able to overcome addiction. So, lack of power, that is our dilemma. The purpose of this book is to give a clear-cut set of directions about how to find that power that'll solve your problem. Okay? Bill Wilson called it a kind of a spiritual kindergarten. Okay? Because it is pretty simple. It's not easy to do, but it is pretty simple. Okay? So we have a lack of power. The only thing in the world that has ever been shown to be able to stop alcoholism and drug addiction has been a spiritual power. And so we're going to come up with this little kit of spiritual tools that will allow us to find that power that'll solve our problem. Okay? And I haven't said it tonight, but I find I've been in the field now for 40-some years, I find that getting the family members into a 12-step program and into recovery is probably 3 times as hard as getting the addicts into it. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. So it's very hard because of the denial and you guys are taking care of everything. And I'm in Al-Anon now a long time. I had the same problems, the resistance coming in. Okay, I have a son who's sober 12 years this past month of March. Thank God, because I was on my knees sobbing about that boy. And I needed to come to Al-Anon, and that's where I got my support. Even though I was a big shot running treatment centers and all that, I still needed that. And thank God I did. So what we're going to do is figure out how you find that power that'll solve your problem. And of course, our problem as family members, the family illness is the alcoholic and drug addict is addicted to drugs. What are we addicted to? We're addicted to them. Okay? And what do? We do everything to try to save them. Everything there is. We cook for them. We take care of their rooms. We buy them cars. We buy them apartments. We give them money. We get them out of jail. We do all this stuff. Right? Along with shaking our fingers and saying, why are you doing that? Most of the time it does absolutely nothing, but we think we're doing something. Now there are other things that we can do, and that's one of the things that this whole thing was started for, to kind of learn what actually works and what is actually helpful. Okay? So, the first sentence is very important. It says rarely. What does rarely mean? That means like almost never. It's very rare. Have we seen a person fail? Rarely. Have we seen a person fail who has, the next big word, thoroughly followed our path? So what do most people do? Partially follow the path, right? We want to pick and choose what we think, being the person with the problem, we have to do. And no, that other stuff is for those other people. The addicts do it, the family members do it, that's what we do. So right in the first thing are two kind of uncompromising words, rarely and thoroughly. And following a path is like when I want to get out of here, I got to go up this way unless I want to jump over benches. So path is a path. Those who do not recover. So right away, rarely, thoroughly, and then it says those who do not recover, are people who cannot, and that's a very small percentage. That's probably a couple of percent. So the cannot is a very small piece. Or will not. Will not. And here's another one of those bad words. Completely give themselves to this simple program. Rarely, thoroughly, completely. Right? We all want a quarter turn. I don't have to do that. This other person's sicker than me. They should do their step. I don't really need these steps. I can cure it, control it. I may have even caused it, but I'll fix that, you know. The delusions we get into. And right away it says, this is a very simple program. A very simple program for complicated people. You know, we can complicate a cup of coffee. Really. We're very complicated people. We got a lot of brain power. We got a lot of things we can get off on. I mean, I was on the hotline, you know, Monday, that thing was just ringing off the hook. And, I mean, she came up for air once in a while, but this gal took me all over the place. It was like being on a sleigh ride. And I was like, whoa, okay, you got to pick something here. You know, you're not going to change the universe, especially over the phone. So they say it's a simple program, and it is. That's the good news. Usually, men and women who are constitutionally incapable, that's subject to a lot of interpretation, but constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, we understand that. That's where delusion, denial, and all kinds of stuff comes in. Right? Most of us have been given denial, rationalization. These are characteristics that the mind has, and they keep us from being honest with ourselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. So now this is telling us it's a simple program, but it's a new manner of living, a new way of living. And this new way of living, by the time you understand it, starts from the time you wake up in the morning until the time you go to bed. It's not like read the passage, go out and keep doing the same thing all day. It's there to take you through a 24-hour compartment in a way that'll be successful to overcome this illness. Their chances are less than average. This is one of the sentences that I love, the next one. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. I think if you have some severe mental illness and you also have addiction, you have a better fighting chance because you can get into AA. There's not necessarily AA for schizophrenics or people with depression. Okay, if you happen to have those, you need to take medicine. You can heal and recover. And I've seen plenty of people. In fact, I've had specialty programs for people that have dual disorders. So that is a possibility. But what do they have to do to recover? They have to have the capacity to be honest. So now we're going back to being honest. So apparently, since honesty is now already mentioned, twice in the first paragraph? Apparently, lo and behold, alcoholics and addicts may have a little problem with honesty. Anybody ever experienced that? We're not exactly honest, Abe. You know, we don't say I chopped down the cherry tree. We tell really good stories, and we get really good at telling the family members really good stories. So, you know, including putting them on the defensive and emotional blackmail and all kinds of stuff to get what we want and to keep them off our back. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have, and here's one of those bad sentences again, okay? You notice it gets kind of easy, and then they come out with these things you can't really escape from. If you have decided, and what's a decision, right? Do we go back on our decisions? Yeah, we do it all the time, unfortunately. So a decision requires some follow-through, some thought, and if you're going to make that decision, right? When we take our marriage vows, we say it's for better, for worse, in richness and poor, in health, and so on and so forth, till death do us part. Like, that's a decision. You know, that's a commitment. Okay, and we try not to break those vows and change those vows. I mean, obviously, it doesn't always work, but that's a decision we make, hopefully, with our eyes open. If you have decided you want what we have, and then here's the problematic part, and are willing to go to any length to get it, that eliminates 80% of the people that walk into AA and Al-Anon right there. They're gone. They're not willing to go to any lengths to get it. They're willing to go to the lengths that they determine, and they don't even know what they're determining. Especially the addicts. I mean, they're far from grasping this right away. If you're going to do that, and you're going to make that decision, and you're willing to go to any lengths, what does any lengths mean? For me, after 8 years of failure, and I went in and out for 8 years before I ever got sober, from 19 to 27. My greatest value of being a counselor in this field was those 8 years of going in and out, because I know how it doesn't work. I know all the angles. You know, God gave me that. I didn't die, and it's been very valuable for the profession I'm in, because I know how to do the quarter turning and all the stuff, and I can smell it, see it, and hear it right away when it starts coming out. Then you are ready to take certain steps. You know, I always ask in the groups, anybody go in the 12-step program? Some say yes. Anybody take the steps? A lot less hands. We do not go into 12-step programming just to hear somebody else's story. We go into 12-step programming to do what? Take the steps ourselves. Then you are ready to take certain steps. We all want our kids to take the steps, but we don't want to take the steps. My mother used to tell me that, you know, do as I say, not as I do. You don't think that, I mean, 10-year-olds pick that up. You're telling me don't do this, don't do that, yet you're doing it. You're telling me this is the most important thing to save your life, but you're not doing it. So I guess it's not that important. And you know, obviously I have some certain way I present, a little sarcasm. Don't take it personally. I'm just, I kind of talk sometimes like you have to argue with alcoholics and drug addicts. I mean, they if it's too soft, they don't get it. Great sentence. Next sentence is just a beauty. Another beauty coming at you. At some of these, we balked. You know what balk means? I don't want to hear That's what that means. You know what a balk is in baseball? The runner takes the base because you screwed up your windup and you balked and you put them on base. Now, some people are really nice. I mean, they balk at everything, so they're right out front. Please help me, but I'm not going to let you. That's one of the codependent war cries, you know. At some of these, we balked. Why did we balk? Why do you think we balked? Well, they answer that question in the next sentence. What's all this balking about? You say you want help? You say you want something that's going to work? What's all the balking? Well, the reason we're balking is we thought we could find an easier, softer way. Love that. I spent 8 years redesigning the program trying to find an easier, softer way, and damn near killed myself real bad. With all the circumstances at our command, we beg of you. Okay, that's kind of a serious thing. You got people you don't know begging you. We beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Now, when you're walking around having anxiety attacks, you're scared to death of the addiction, you're fear-based on a daily basis, you're full of character defects from living with this stuff for the last 5 years, recovery is fearful too. It looks tough. I have to face myself. I have to do my own inventory. I have to tell that to another human being. I have to pray every day, you know. I mean, I had a hard time in here 2 months ago because this is a sanctuary. I was like, and I got jokes on Facebook. Father Mark spoke at the, you know. So, so we ask you to be fearless and thorough. There's that word again. Not a lot of quarter there. Thorough means I'm following this. Here's the next one. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas. It's what we do. That's what we do. I have old ideas that I think are going to work. I'm going to keep listening to those ideas. I'm not going to employ the new ideas. I'm going to pick and choose, like I'm at the buffet line, what I think I want to do. And I'll call that thorough, and I'll call that fearless, and what I end up with is my old ideas. One of the only reasons I'm alive today is when I finally hit my last bottom and I asked somebody to be my sponsor. I made a commitment. I knew that the problem was within me, that I shouldn't listen to anything I had to say or think about. And all I wanted to do was ask this man called my sponsor, what do you want me to do today? Or what about this? And then I would call him back and I said, this is what I did. Is that what you wanted me to do? That was a very different thing. It's not that difficult, but it was very different for me. Because I knew that the person who was really kicking my butt for the last 8 years was me. It was my ideas, my shortcuts, not being thorough, all that good stuff. So we tried to hold on our old ideas, and what was the result of that? The result was nil, nothing, doesn't work. I'm not making these words up, by the way. That's in this book that was printed a long time ago, before I was born. Was nil until we let go absolutely. You notice they don't mince words in how it works, right? We have to let go absolutely. So I have to let go of my old ideas. I have to have room for new ones. Remember, it was on my mind all day today and all day yesterday, this next sentence. Remember that we deal with alcohol cunning, baffling, and powerful. Alone, without a higher power, without a fellowship, we don't have a chance. And sometimes even with all that, we don't have a chance. Cunning, baffling, and powerful. I think those are pretty short and sweet words. Without help, it is too much for us. I already proved that. I didn't need another 8 years of going in and out to prove that I wasn't capable of doing this. In fact, I knew I couldn't do it. And the only thing, one of the things that saved my life was the traditions of AA, because nobody could ever kick me out. When I kept coming through those doors in different states, they didn't say like, oh, we've seen you here before. You know, you're a junkie, criminal, thief, and no damn good. We don't want you in the room. Nobody could say that to me. And I didn't really like AA that much. I thought they were kind of goody two-shoes, holy rollers, but they seemed happy, and I wasn't. So I went back in one more time, and it worked. And the thing that allowed me to keep coming back was the traditions. It wasn't this book, it was the traditions. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. You know, our common welfare should come first. Principles above personality. So there's no president, there's nobody in AA could kick me out. I didn't trust them because they didn't. I was like, do you know who you have in the room here? But I didn't get treated like that. And so I thought, like, these are decent people. I'm going to come back. That's all I have. And, you know, this December I celebrated 41 years of continuous sobriety. Because I finally followed the directions through a sponsor. Because I couldn't read the book. I couldn't read. I was so focused from all the drugs. I just had to trust this guy. That's how I first got sober. When he told me this is what you do, I said, damn, that's what I'm doing. Because I couldn't read and digest stuff. I was too sick. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. And AA was brilliant because they knew that alcoholics don't like to be told anything. And neither do many family members, for that matter. And, you know, so mostly we call it a higher power. God's mentioned once in the steps, and the rest of the time, you choose whatever power, as long as it isn't you. I mean, some of the real great sponsors say, all you got to know, son, is that you're not God. As long as you can get that, then you know, you can start this thing. You know, is there a power greater than yourself? Is this room smarter than me by myself? Absolutely. Is the groups we're going to go in smarter and have more power than me by myself? Absolutely. No question about it. Not even close. So they knew they had to give a wide berth. You know, I'm always amazed when I read this how they really don't mince words. I mean, this is how it is. Half measures availed us what? Nothing. Half measures availed us nothing. 85% of the people that walk into AA and Al-Anon are full of half measures, quarter turns, and their old ideas. It's very hard to get rid of half measures. It's very scary, let's put it that way. Why should I do this? Next sentence. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. I think we're back to that psychiatrist in Europe who said the only shot you got is a spiritual condition. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Partial abandon, it didn't say that. It means jump in with both feet. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. I'm not going to go through all the steps, but I will end with the last two paragraphs on the next page, which says, many of us exclaimed, "What an order." I can't go through with it. They have that in quotes, right? So they knew. What an order. I can't do all that. What are you kidding me? Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. God, I love that sentence. Saints? I mean, you know, my life before getting in here was so far from sainthood, and I'm still a long way from it, trust me, but there was no saint running around out there. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. What do they say? Bring an attitude of humility, which means teachability. And all you have to do is have a willingness, right? A willingness to grow along spiritual lines. Two things: be teachable and be willing. Again, over 80% of the people can't even bring that to the table. You know, eventually they do. It depends on how bad the pain gets, how bad things get. The worse things get, the more people are willing, right? All of a sudden, I have families I've been working with for 2 years. Don't go down on, don't do this, don't do that. And the kid ends up almost dead in the emergency room, and all of a sudden they're in the program with 2 feet. Or the kid's going to get locked up for dealing for the next 2 to 5, and now it's different. It's the same thing been going on, but it's just different consequences. So some of us don't get it until we really get our world rocked, unfortunately. We are not saints. The point is we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description to the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, there's a whole chapter in there about if you're agnostic and don't believe, because we have plenty of agnostics that are successful in AA and NA. And the chapter in our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. And these are worth trying to memorize them because it's a summary of everything we just talked about. A, we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. That's what unmanageability is in the first step, right? I've been trying to manage this thing and it hasn't been working. So I'm alcoholic, I cannot manage my own life. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. Okay, we go right back to the shrink in Europe, right at the beginning. We need a higher power, we need a spiritual power. Lack of power, that's our dilemma, right? Going back to the beginning. Probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. So ABC. And those people who take these steps and maintain every day their spiritual condition, because all we get is a spiritual condition. Okay? We get a reprieve from our alcoholism a day at a time based on our spirit. That's it. There's no permanent thing here. You haven't been vaccinated. You haven't been changed permanently. I mean, I wish to God we had a surgical suite where you could take out this addiction thing, put in something else, and everybody would be fine. That's how a lot of the rest of medicine runs. It doesn't run that way here. Thank you for your kind attention.